The title of my presentation is Key Findings of the Interview Paper. To begin, I would like to give a little bit of information about my interviewee. She is from Lima, Peru, and moved to the United States in 2019. Since moving here, she has grown to learn much about our culture here in the United States and find herself able to differentiate and understand the differences between the culture in the United States and the culture in Peru. For this reason, I have chosen to include her opinions on the differences and similarities between the United States and Peru. To begin, my interviewee gave me a detailed description of the expectations she had of the United States, and then the reality of her expectations when she moved here. She stated that the way she expected life to be in the United States was a close representation of what it actually was when she got here. She went on to state that life was even better than had previously been expected. She explained that in Peru, the United States is seen as futuristic and well advanced, and that she was looking forward to being here and being able to experience it. My interviewee gave some cultural differences between Peru and the United States. The Peruvian culture seems to be more laid back than the North American culture that we are used to. Peruvians typically have an unplanned way of life. They do things spontaneously, and when someone cancels a plan, it is seen as normal. Whereas in the United States, we typically have a more organized way of life. We plan things beforehand, and cancellations to us are seen as rude or offensive. The differences between these two cultures is significant. As my interviewee explains, however, she seems to be adapting to this new way of life very well. The differences in communication languages and techniques between Peru and the United States is also something my interviewer and I spoke about. In Peru, the official language is Spanish, whereas in the United States it is English. The Spanish language and those who speak it use more stories and illustrations to get a point across than do English speakers. In the United States, my interviewee stated, we get more straight to the point. Lastly, the Spanish language is typically seen as more expressive than English because of the different tones and meanings of certain words. In Peru, the social aspect of life is somewhat similar and yet different to the way it is in the United States. In Peru, plans with friends are typically made spontaneously. My interviewee stated that they almost never make plans far out in advance, but rather decide on a whim that they will go do something together. Socially, Peruvians are very friendly and easy to get along with. They tend to make friends with people who have similar interests to themselves. Social life in Peru can be categorized as generally simple and easygoing. For my interview, I requested my interviewee to give me a sample schedule of a typical day in the life of a teenage Peruvian during the school year. She explained that in detail that on a typical day she would wake up, get ready for school, and have breakfast. She would then go to school until around 2, and then she would go to work at her after-school job. After she finished her work, she would go home and eat dinner and work on homework. Around 9 at night, she would go to dance practice until around 11. She would then come home, finish her homework, and go to bed. The one thing that stood out to me about the schedule is the late-night dance or sports practice that she said was typical for most students in Peru. In the United States, we tend to have after-school practice and late-night jobs, but for Peruvians, their schedule is much different. To continue on, I inquired of the typical rules of a household in Peru. My interviewee stated that although her household was somewhat regulated, most households in Peru were very lenient with rules. There is typically no set meal time, and family members eat whenever they have time. Likewise, children do not typically have a set curfew or bedtime, but they do as they wish. Overall, my interviewee stated, rules in the household in Peru are typically much more allowing than rules are in a typical household in the United States. When presented with the request of naming a cultural holiday that is celebrated in Peru, my interviewee responded with a holiday celebration called Canción Criolla. This holiday is celebrated on October 31st instead of Halloween. This holiday is intended to commemorate Peru and the benefits of the country. Typical cultural food and music is presented at these celebrations. In a typical marriage relationship in Peru, the roles of both spouses are similar to the roles of spouses here in the United States. The male typically makes more money and the female also has a job, but her primary responsibility is keeping the house and raising the children. In Peru, however, my interview stated that the cost of daycare is relatively cheap and more affordable than it is here in the United States. So in Peru, many families opt for this form of childcare during the day. Typically, however, the roles of both the male and female are similarly shared. My interviewee also provided me with a menu of typical meals for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. For breakfast, the typical go-to is bread and butter, tamales or ham, and either Quaker, which is drinkable oatmeal, or hot coffee. For lunch, the options are numerous. Peruvians typically choose either lentils with rice and chicken, ACP, ceviche, which is raw fish, lemon juice, seasonings, corn, and onion, or casa, which is chicken, potatoes, and vegetables. For dinner, Peruvians typically either eat leftovers or eat out at a restaurant. Wrapping up, I will now turn to the discussion of the typical Peruvian Catholic Church. The typical church denomination in Peru is Catholic, and it is also where my interviewee attended when she lived in Peru. The Catholic Church in Peru allows members to go whenever they would like, so as to not cause discrimination based on church attendance. Catholic churches do not typically have Wednesday night services, as do most churches in the United States. All Catholic church services, or at least most, in Peru are done in Spanish. The Catholic Church is also very active with local charities. Catholic churches in Peru are likely very similar to Catholic churches in the United States. Overall, however, the different aspects of the Catholic Church tie in very well with the way the culture is shaped in Peru. Some of the key findings I obtained from this interview include similarities and differences between some aspects of society between Peru and the United States, the social and educational structure in Peru, and many of the other aspects of Peruvian culture. I believe that my findings have given me a significantly better understanding of the life and culture in Peru.